Vikings fans. This is Joe's, and I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and your official social distancing Vikings fan community, Vikesgeist. Hop in the message board if you want to maintain 3 feet of distance while also bemoaning your favorite football team. I am here, at least for another week, with Mr. Joe Oberly.
Hola. I
How you
miss
doing,
our
man?
I miss our intro song, our intro music.
Me
It's
too.
so sad without it. What
I
do you
know
know, Joe?
my 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 dad 10 times now that we have to bring the music back. The reason I got rid of it, I was trying to ascertain why we were getting like 1,000 downloads or streams a week from iHeartRadio. Then all of a sudden they just all stopped, and I thought maybe it was a rights issue, even though I'm pretty sure that song is fair use because it was a
Yeah.
pre-war song. And so maybe the algorithm picked it up even though it shouldn't have, but it's hard to really get in touch with one there. So I'm just
Well,
doing experiments.
well, for what it's worth, Joe, I just heard this morning that today is National Joe Day.
What day?
National Joe Day.
It is?
It is, in fact.
Hey,
I have no idea who names these things and pronounces these things and proclaims this day of all day, March 22nd, 2020 is National Joe Day. So, maybe you should just throw that music on there just for the heck of it sometime in the show.
is that like a prima nocta thing? We get one day where we get all the new brides?
Well, yeah, it could be. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but and my dad always used to say about, I'm, pretty much a full purebred German, and he used to say about St. Patty's Day, let them have their day. We'll take the other 364.
Yeah, there's an Norm MacDonald joke that I will butcher, but essentially he just talks about how every time Germany goes to war, they go to war with the world. Um, and the messed up part, they almost won.
Go big or
Um,
go home. That's what
yeah, I guess. My mom just did a 23 and me, and I don't have any German blood from that side. I'm pretty sure I don't from my dad's side either. I don't know how to feel about that.
yeah, I've got, it's predominantly German. There's a little bit of Irish in there. And actually I had one relative say there's some Jewish blood. So my,
Wow.
my 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 lineage were friends with the Jews. Weren't those bad Germans? So
Yeah, and mine, like I learned there's some Danish in there, and then it's Swedish and mostly Irish too. So it's those are Germanic people outside of the Irish, I suppose.
yeah,
So it's all the same. We're all pale. We learned in the
yes,
sun.
and it's funny. It's because it has nothing to do with actual DNA of what your nationality is. I was doing it. I wanted a big genome of or whatever of exactly what I was, but
Didn't
I'll
you
take
visit
it.
your like ancestral home in Germany a couple
I
years
did.
ago?
I did. Oberkirch, Germany is where it is. Yeah, where my great great grandfather was born and lived and he and his brother 9 and 10 years old came to the United States at that age. After they sold farm, and they had people they were meeting over here. But they got out at 9 and 10 years old and came over here. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, we
Yeah.
got to. I reunited there with a bunch of my cousins, and we had a great time. Just it's a beautiful, it's near the Alsace-Lorraine border, with France and over by the Rhine, and we toured around there. It's beautiful country. It's not much different than Minnesota, to be honest with you, but it was gorgeous. We loved it.
That's awesome. I've always
Yeah.
wanted to track down my cousins in Sweden. One of my cousins on my dad's side did like his dissertation about the genealogy and the family history when like my paternal great grandfather came over and worked the railroad and basically he had two options when he got off the boat in New York. It was to kill Native Americans or work the railroad. He worked the railroad, got
Nice.
to South Dakota. One of the didn't go off. They were trying to make a tunnel, and they were like, "You Swedes go in there and check the TNT." And he was like, "I'm not doing that." So he literally walked from there to I think northern Minnesota and joined like this logging commune where they were
Hmm.
like are you Swedish or Norwegian? And he said, well, my mom's Norwegian, my dad's Swedish, so I'm kind of both. And they said you have to pick one or the other because that's what all the fist fights here are about, between the Swedes and the Norwegians. So he picked the Swedish side. Um, Probably, I think, because his dad is Swedish, mom was Norwegian, and
So you got some Viking blood in you?
pretty much.
Nice.
Um,
That explains
which,
a lot.
yeah, doesn't it? That means the failure that I feel goes back generations.
Yes, it's ancestral. Your depression over the failed Viking
It's
squad.
all starting to make sense a little bit.
Much as this long discussion before our discussion of Vikings, this all making sense now. Why we had to talk about our lineage to get to this agenda we have now, right?
Yeah, I mean, things just, I don't know. I'm trying my best. I do feel like when you and I do the show, and I mean this in all seriousness, when I have someone to bounce some of my Viking Vikings angst off of, I kind of start to feel a little embarrassed about my approach to the team. Because for the most part, as we also discussed, we're high risk for corona for different reasons. I was born an incomplete human, and my lungs kind of suck, so I'm just avoiding everybody. And so I'm just sitting in my base, my parents' mother-in-law's suite, brooding, and especially last week, it was just one thing after another. It was like, oh my god, oh my god.
Come lay down on my virtual psychiatrist couch, Joe. Come
Pretty
lay down.
much. I am. I think it's you care. My
Thank you.
number is I bet it does feel sometimes like the stars just aligned against the Vikings. I mean, reading about this week the fact that the Vikings actually weren't going to trade Diggs, despite the fact that he was being an epic jackass, more so than usual, on social media. But they were doing their due diligence, I guess, and just fielding offers because that's what teams are supposed to do in situations like these. And the Bills essentially gave him what the national NFL pundits are basically calling a king's ransom for what he's done. One thing that you pointed out last week that seems meaningless at the time, but I guess encompasses things um, with Diggs is that he was never a Pro Bowler. And a lot of people are saying don't compare him to Randy Moss because obviously they're just two different worlds of talent, impact, and all of that. Um, but so basically, people are saying like the Bills may have overpaid for him, or if they knew the full scope of what was going on here and waited, the Vikings could have traded him maybe a week or two into the season for much less because things were just on the precipice of implosion one way or the other. And I don't know how to feel about that, I guess, because I do feel like if they hadn't traded him and things went sideways this season, which they look like they're going to, they just would have been a really untenable situation anyway. But then again, it's like, why would a team give up that much for a guy like Diggs, who's what, an 1,100-yard guy?
It's really amazing when you juxtapose it with the uh, Hopkins trade down in Houston.
Yeah,
Uh, how they got for him, and he's the top three best in the league. And people all Diggs would probably argue he belongs in that category too. He's been great, but the Vikings had a more balanced offense with him and Thielen in there as far as the passing game is concerned, and he probably didn't get the same attention that DeAndre Hopkins did. But I don't know where that came from, I guess is my point. It is, how do you pass that up, especially when you're a team that's got no salary cap money? This helps in the cap, gives you more draft choices. They're easier to sign financially than free agents are, and it enabled the Vikings in a lot of ways to maybe salvage this season because they weren't going to be able to go out and get a lot of high buck free agents, if at all, until they cleared cap space. And it kind of, it's tough because I'm sure in the meeting room and they're saying, hey, we got Diggs, we got Thielen, we got Cook, and we just got to bolster the offensive line, and this offense is good to go, and we got another year under the system, blah 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 blah, and I'm sure they did not want to blow that up, when When, as they say in The Godfather, you make him an offer you can't refuse. I guess you got to take it and see what happens.
Yeah, and I wonder. I mean, I wrote about this in the article. What did you have to be wrong? He's going to be able to sit on his hands in Buffalo, um, with Josh Allen throwing him the ball. I mean, say what you will about Cousins. Diggs had his best 2 years as a pro since Cousins. He had 102 receptions in 2018. He had 1,100 yards last season. He was the guy last year was injured. Uh, I don't watch like most people do, unless it's like a loop of like 98 NFC Championship game back to back with the 2009 championship game. But
Mm-hmm.
and so I know that like Josh Allen, I guess his numbers don't tell the whole story because his receivers have been bad and there's been a lot of drops. A lot of like the Josh Allen highlight things on YouTube are just all the drops his receivers have had. So like the 58% peak completion rate that he had as a rookie, I think he had a step back 55% his second year, isn't completely on him, but also there's not that many drops. I kind of think it's a be careful what you wish for thing with him because I just don't see him going 2 seasons in Buffalo with, you know, I think he expects to be like a 14, 1,500 yard a season guy now.
Yeah, it. You know, I kind of feel bad about it because it almost seemed like when Thielen last year, obviously, Stephon Diggs, came to the front, to the fore, and started becoming the guy to throw the ball to downfield. He did kind of step out of that tandem shadow that those two had, and you almost thought, okay, now they get back together. Maybe they have another year in the offense and they're both healthy and you can really see how it's supposed to work. And, now we're not going to be able to see that. I really felt he got the ball. He's going to be happy. He's not going to be any more crabbing. Well, that didn't stop. It had all this cryptic stuff online and on his social media. And it just like, damn, you do want to, he wasn't terrible, but you could tell he wanted out of here. And it's too bad. I get as an old school type guy, I get kind of frustrated when the silent and force their way here or that and create the teams they want. Well, good luck in Buffalo, I guess. I don't know. It's too bad that it happened, but it did, and it's what we have.
I don't. I wrote an article yesterday, last night, about 12 hours ago, about the reports that Xavier Rhodes, signed with the Colts, but he was given an offer from the Vikings and he spurned that for a fresh start. Then you look at Mackenzie Alexander, doing the same thing. Then you look at Diggs being unhappy for whatever reason.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, and then you go back to Rhett Ellison's dad and his toxic leadership tweet and Curse being unhappy, for example. And I kind of went guy by guy and said what you just said, which is, I remember being, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old playing youth hockey in Minneapolis and having my coaches scream profanity at us and throw water bottles around the locker room in Albert Lee or Duluth during a tournament because we weren't running like the right breakout or whatever. And it's like, we're 10 years old. Like, what do you expect? So I have limited patience, I guess, in general, but especially at times like these for these millionaires who, as Coach Tice put it when we had him on the show, he retired because guys just don't want to be quote unquote coached anymore. Maybe that's a generational thing with millennials and participation trophies and whatnot. Um, but I posited that I was on the Vikings Discord channel last night and I talked about that. And on the other hand side of it, though, as Bud Grant once said, even well before social media and this me climate, that it's the coach's job to manage personalities, and it just doesn't seem like other at least successful franchises have issues like these. So it's just another, I guess, valid question to ask about
Yeah,
this
it is.
rebuild. Is maybe Zimmer's Parcellian approach, or his inability to bite his tongue in the media, as that was because of why Anthony Barr was mad, and Chad Greenway, who's going to be on the show next week, uh, was right after he retired, kind of sat down with Zimmer and talked to him about that, ways to improve, so on and so forth. It didn't really change anything. Um, it, do these guys not want to play for him anymore for any number of reasons? And I mean, valid or not, or if we don't really relate to the players' reasons, that's still something we should look at, I guess. Is
It's a valid question. I mean, I grew up with a high school football coach who was definitely old school. He had gone to high school with my dad. My dad became a plumber, so he called me Plunger as a result. That was a nickname for me. But I was my way or the highway, and he was pretty dictatorial. And back then you just accepted, if you wanted to play, you just you did what you had to do and swallowed that. But that stuff probably wouldn't fly today in your youth sports. On
that's true?
a pro level, I'm back and forth. I don't. I like Zimmer. I think the way he does things is good. I always feel like he's an honest guy when he's talking to the media, and he might wear the his emotions on his sleeve a little too much, and maybe that rubs some of these players the wrong way. And I think there is something to that. When he has a mentor in old school guy like Parcells, which is my way or the highway, you can see where it comes from. I think he's tried to learn, as you just mentioned, with talking to Greenway and talking to others, and the Bar situation bother him. But by the same token, these guys, when they're not upset with them, they come out and say how much they love him. I mean, Harrison Smith never crabs. Barr came back. On and on. I don't blame Rhodes for spurning them, and I don't know that it had anything as much to do with uh, Zimmer. I mean, if you look back at his season last year, he had more than one time where he was really frustrated on the sidelines for one reason or the other, whether with one of his teammates or himself or something else, and he became the lightning rod for everything that was wrong with the Vikings defense in the last few years. There was such a hot lights on him. Everything he did. I mean, he could be covering a guy well and turn his hips a little late or the wrong way, and he's going to make a mistake, and suddenly he's throwing his helmet, and the media and the fans just go nuts on him. I kind of was hoping they'd get him back just because the secondary defense has been decimated, and that maybe he could start over here, but and somehow regain what he was here a few years ago. But I think it's the best thing for him, so I don't blame him a bit. A guy like Mackenzie Alexander, I might blame a little bit more. But then his seems emotions behind it as well. He struggled with Zimmer's system the first few years, and when he finally got it, Zimmer was not shy about saying it was a mental thing where he had to decide, to play within the system rather than try to make a big play every time out there. And it seemed like he did, and he was just building. So I thought, maybe this is the way to go. It's time for his graduation to starting at corner, and that's where the role. And then he left, so that one disappoints me a little bit. It's really interesting that three starting quarterbacks per se left. So I mean, you have to ask that question that you're asking, and I'm hoping that they're asking that question as well. But they got two head coaches in there with him, Zimmer and Kubiak, and if you start seeing Kubiak get frustrated and want to leave and not wanting to play, coach with Zimmer, then maybe you have to really get serious about it. But there's something they still love about him, I believe, and I'm hopeful that that isn't the case, because God, everybody's going to end up leaving.
Yeah, I mean, just opposed it, I guess, too, with last season. Barr came back, took less money from the Jets. Everson Griffin
Right.
restructured. Um, but maybe that was based on a group belief that they had something special and that they could have made a run for a Super Bowl. Maybe that doesn't exist anymore. I can see why the team would want to keep a guy like Rhodes, especially because they're fifth in the league in dead cap money right now. They are getting Rhodes almost 5 million, 4.8 million in 2020 to play for the Colts. And
They
so if they
are.
brought him back and even paid
Oh
him six
God,
million, you're getting some value
that's
out of it.
painful. That's painful.
Yeah, it's that's why I think bringing Linval back is important for other reasons, because he's a great player still. But
Linval?
yeah, because they're gonna owe him a decent chunk of dead cap as well. And I
What
think
what do you say bringing him back? They can't bring him back. He signed with somebody else, didn't he?
did he? I just checked last night and it said he was still a free agent.
Linval Joseph? God, I thought, yeah.
Let me Bears. Uh,
I mean, I was thinking I'd be hopeful. I mean, I don't think they can bring him back. They certainly don't have the room now that they still their defensive tackle. So I thought Linval signed with somebody. I want to say not the Seahawks, but the Chargers or might be the Chargers. But
Maybe somebody didn't update his Wikipedia because that's where I looked and it says he's a free agent. Oh, you're right.
Chargers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
totally missed
yes,
that. Dang it. Well,
that's our
my whole
yeah.
off-season plan, it's over. It was Linval heavy. I was actually gonna put him at the nickel corner spot. um,
I'd pay to see that
wow, look at
once.
Wikipedia.
No, it's I don't know. I mean, Zimmer is for as much as he might crab occasionally in public. He praises in public too. I mean, he will tell people how I love this guy or I love that guy or I love this team, and you hear that from him, and I take him at his word. I think he's as emotional as they are. And he gets to attach to his players, and maybe there's good and bad in that because maybe if like you said, Bud Grant says you got to manage the personalities, and sometimes they can't all be managed the same way, and it's a difficult thing. It's certainly not. It's certainly not back like it was back in the days when
No,
you just went to practice, did your thing, and then went like Jim Marshall did and go skydiving or doing whatever else
go
he did.
smoke a pack of cigarettes and drink a six-pack.
Yes, I used to see the defensive line down at the local head shop in Mankato when I was growing up. And you'd see him walk in there. People are saying, "Hey, I saw Carl Eller and Alan Page at the Lost Chord." So it was it was a different time back then.
Head shop is in like head shop.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow,
I sold records and they sold paraphernalia and
yeah.
stuff.
The
I don't
future of
know what I
Supreme
don't.
Court justice.
I'm sure he was there buying some used records like I was. So I'm not going to cast as any aspersions on either
So there,
anybody's.
there was it hasn't all been an exodus. The Vikings signed a few players this week. One being Tajay Sharp, the receiver from the Titans, the other being Anthony Settle, the journeyman defensive end who most recently played with the 49ers, played in the Super Bowl. Zettel is not a starting level guy. He's a depth move. They also re-signed Brett Jones for some reason. Um, he's always being re-signed by this team for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Never sees the field. There's an article out there on a competing website basically that stated if Sharp and Zettel start in 2020, along with Pierce, the defensive tackle that played most recently for the Ravens that we talked about last week. It's a bad sign for the Vikings. I would agree in regards to Zettel or even Pierce, but I think Tajay Sharp has the potential to be a really good addition to this offense after delving into his situation. I wrote an article about that on VikingsTerritory.com. He when if you're looking to replace Diggs, there's a few things you're going to want to do. You're going to want a guy who runs crisp routes. You're going to want a guy who can make plays at every level, short, intermediate, deep, um, deep passes or routes. He does that. He's known as a precision route runner. He's known as a guy who, unlike Diggs, takes criticism, wants to get better. Is a term coming out of the combine was that he was extremely humble. He's also 2 inches taller than Diggs is. He does run a tenth of a second slower 40 time 4.45. Or no, Diggs ran a 4.46. He ran a 4.55, so just under a tenth of a second. But you could do worse. I mean, he's relatively, again, the receiver in the or the outside, understand can and run relatively complex. Again, I think if they would have had him third last year, I think he could have done a lot of damage. I don't know necessarily being the full points or across from Thielen, if that would be the can't imagine it would be. I'm sure a thing. He like a poor man's dollar. The other criticism coming out of college was that he was he needed to meet about 10 pounds of muscle since then in 4 years.
Say the same thing about he's a pretty slight guy, and he certainly spends his injury list.
Who
Yeah,
Diggs?
yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah,
tiny. I mean, stand to have some armor put on him too. Some small shot of him coming across the middle, and he might be a while, but then again, so quick he doesn't get hit. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, you laid it out. We'll see what they got. You know, I mean, there's a reason why he was available for a pretty decent contract that the Vikings can afford. Uh, so I'm sure he's not going to be as good as what we had in Diggs, but you know, who knows? I mean, maybe you don't have to be spectacular. You just have to catch passes if you've got a varied enough offense and enough weapons and you give your quarterback time. Doesn't matter who's out there, just so he's not, you know, dropping the ball when you hit him in stride like Cousins can do. So we'll see. You know, so I was just hope that he can fill one of those spots and they get somebody in the draft that can really, you know, excite people and get them all fired up because I think they really do need some really high speed threat out there that can, you know, take the top off defenses and you know, not allow them to double cover anybody else out there because that's key.
yeah. There's a few options I think in looking forward towards the draft where they could do that. The problem with Diggs replacing Diggs is that he again was just so good at nearly everything. Outside of deleting his Twitter account, you know, he could do just like Thielen essentially. You know, run all the routes, catch all the passes, line up
Mm-hmm.
outside, inside, short, medium, maybe not going across the middle so much, but it's gonna be hard to find a guy to do that in the first round. There's a few burners from what I've read that might be available. I mean, some of those Alabama guys will be gone by 22 or 20 unless they trade up. I don't think they should trade up. I just wrote an article about the points associated with each draft, what it would take to trade up, since a lot of people are talking about bundling picks and trading up or whatever. And if the Vikings combined the 22 and the 25, they would get 1,500 points. The number one overall pick is 1,000 points. Number two, so they could trade the top 10, I guess. And that's from Alabama. Was talking about it. God, I can hear my dad already at the post office downtown. What are you talking about that guy for? Another JJ. Um,
Abrams,
ooh,
I haven't. Uh,
Judy. Um,
Judy,
I don't
Judy.
know. Who knows? Anyway,
Your dad does. This guy loves SE receivers.
yeah, I I don't know. I really don't.
No, it's
I
hard to
really
say.
don't.
It's all speculation. You know, you always have you never know what you're going to get. The Vikings didn't do themselves any favors draft wise by winning the playoff or you know making the playoffs and winning a game. So they're you know you're going to start late to begin with, like they always do. They're a team that wins every year and very rarely you know peaks on themselves to the point where they get a top 3 or 4 pick and you know, last one they did was Matt Khalil, and they traded up to get him, or I guess they traded down. They had the 3rd pick, I think,
That is right.
and they traded down to the 4th with Cleveland and got another pick, which was some great wheeling and dealing. Unfortunately, Matt Khalil's time here was short lived, and it was never great. So I don't
Remember
know.
what his nickname was coming out of that draft? Like he was the sure thing, the safe pick.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Yikes.
it's all speculation and hope, and it's a crapshoot. You've heard me say it a million times. Draft is a crapshoot, even in the top end. So you just got to do your due diligence and make sure you know what you're getting, and you know, don't reach like they did with Treadwell and
Or Ponder.
Ponder.
Yeah.
Ponder those 2 picks will you know are troublesome for the Vikings, but you put them in a grouping of all the other ones that Spielman has hit on, and I think he's done pretty well, and I trust him to continue to do. You may not agree with that, but or
I
maybe
wouldn't mind like Zimmer being the head scout of this draft. I just don't want this draft to be the reason that they keep Zimmer around for another 5 years because he put his fingerprints over all these picks. I also don't want them. I would like if they're really doing a rebuild for them to do it the opposite way that they did it before and focus on the offensive line first and let everything else come after that because I think we've seen time and time again that that's what ended these promising seasons for the Zimmer team. So, you know, why not do it that way? Getting rid of Klein does not bolster my enthusiasm that that will be the case. But who knows? He could still re-sign unless he signed with the Chargers last week, and I'm just bad at my job.
yeah, if you put Zimmer as far as your head scout, well, you're going to have all defensive players then. But
That's true. But
uh,
you'll hit on all of them. But then you have to wonder if those players are good or if they pan out because Zimmer is good at identifying and developing talent solely for his system. And if someone else comes in and flips it, Dom Capers takes over and they turn into a 3-4. Um, what that may mean for the players on the roster, I don't know. I do want to clear one thing up. That people have said about getting rid of Diggs before we get into a little bit some of the I guess I don't know other topics on the agenda. You just gotta be
I'm losing
prepared
you,
for
Joe.
this.
I'm losing you.
I know I haven't had enough caffeine, and I'm just actually I take back what I said earlier. Usually I feel better about the state of things when I talk to you. Um,
And I take back what I said earlier. There was nothing untoward at all going on down in Mankato at the law school.
um, so one of the articles I wrote while we were on a sabbatical was kind of dealing with the myth of when people were talking about trading Diggs, they were essentially saying having two elite receivers in a Kubiak system is kind of superfluous because you only really need one. You're running a two tight end system, and there's just not enough balls to go around to justify
Yeah.
two elite wide
Well,
receivers.
there is if all you care about is winning. But if you're caring about, I've got to, put up numbers and I've got to have the ball and I've got, if you want to be like that, well then no.
Yeah,
You know, it's of course you want the best players that, I agree with exactly what you're saying. It seems like it could be too much. You don't need that. Well, that's what you want. You just want everybody to get along and say we're all in this together for one goal, and it doesn't matter who gets to do the touchdown dance. It matters, who gets to open the champagne at the end of the
yeah.
season. So just stop. But anyway, go
And
ahead.
the reality is, if you look at the best really comparison in terms of a Kubiak run offense to what the Vikings at least were in 2019, and before that would have been 2015 when he was the head coach of the Broncos, and they had Emmanuel Sanders and Demarius Thomas, two really good wide receivers. In that instance, the number one and the number two receiver on that offense got the ball 67% of the time when they threw it. Typically, it's around 55 to 60% for Kubiak-led offense. So the idea that they're just going to be throwing the ball to Kyle Rudolph or Smith Jr. over and over again, I think doesn't pan out because, like you
No,
said,
does
it depends on who's open. I mean,
yes.
not necessarily what the formation is because two tight ends still means there's two wide receivers on the field, not one. And so I just that argument doesn't hold a lot of water if you
Depends
just
on who's the openest before the panic sets in for the quarterback. Oh God, I said that about Kirk Cousins.
uh and
No,
as
yeah,
we
all those
stand
numbers.
now,
Yeah, all those numbers are just they're just numbers. I mean, they're when Kurt's paid back to pass, he's not thinking about am I got my percentages up to this guy?
yeah.
He's just looking who beat their guy in a split second, firing it,
Is this guy happy? What about this guy?
yeah,
That's yeah.
exactly.
It's unfair pressure to put on a guy who's clearly already crumbling under internal and external pressure. There's a lot of people talking too about I don't know where this came from or why two or three of our competition wrote the same article at the exact same time. They all popped up. It made me feel like maybe there's some rumor that I'm not aware of or I'm not as connected as these guys. But people are talking about bringing Trent Williams in as they've done for years with the Vikings, and the risk or the gambit is that the only way they could really do it would be to release Riley Reef and clear up that 8.8 million in cap space, bringing their cap space to
Riley Reef,
22 million.
Brian O'Neill, on the line, a couple in the backfield. What I hear, he wants 22 million. It's just no way.
Well, I think they said he's worth 15. That releasing Reef would get the Vikings to 22 million, but then you turn around and give 15 to that to a guy who is injured a lot.
Yeah,
Um, and
and he's a bit of a headache too, I
yes,
think. So.
and they do have I forget that guy's name. They just brought in that new co-offensive line coach or advisor or whatever who was
Mm-hmm.
uh one of the coaches in Washington, and then there's the familiarity of Cousins. But if you let Reef go and then you don't end up signing him, then you're extra screwed. So I don't necessarily like that move. I think that building through the draft should be the way that they go. I don't know. Reef
I
has
don't have.
looked great, I guess, and he's overpaid, but it just seems like whenever this team gets close to having any semblance of depth on the offensive line, they get rid of it right away. And Klein being an example, Alex Boone being another not great example because he was overweight and kind of an asshole, but you gotta have depth to get rid of some of these guys, and they just never have it.
Yeah, I don't see them making that move and even trying. It's a non-starter for me. That it's too high priced, and there's some baggage there because he's pretty disgruntled where he was at, as far as I can tell. And it might be a game, but uh, you need cohesion on that line, and uh, it seems like it would be a hope and a prayer, as much as anything. I just don't think they can afford it, so it won't happen. So they got to look elsewhere. They'll go with Reef and backfill with some mix, financially and start developing. And it sounds like at least maybe it's either I don't know if it's by design or because they have to, but they're trying. They're about having some of their people they've developed in the past come in and play just because other people are leaving, I guess. So we'll see, but I.
Yeah,
I
I don't
still
see
want to know what
why give 15 million to a guy who's gonna be 32 before the season starts.
you don't. You just don't.
They're not a left tackle away from contending at this point.
No.
That's just too much. That's like 75% of your cap space for, like you said, a mercurial guy. They clearly just got rid of one of those guys in Diggs, and they gotta they gotta go through the draft. At this point, I don't even think I'd be against moving Brian O'Neill to left tackle and then looking for a right tackle in the draft. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
that if he acclimated this quickly, that switching sides won't be something that he can't handle. And he's just been so good that if he can replicate that on the left side, then you can build on that. Find someone to play left guard. Then you have Bradbury, and then you can look at maybe bringing Klein back. And it's just a lot easier to find a right tackle, especially late in the first round or late in the second round or whatever, than otherwise trying to find a left tackle and trading up. So,
Why don't they just trade for a left-handed quarterback and leave Brian
oh,
Hill where he is? Just
ooh,
kidding.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, I
Does
don't
that
know.
change
Well, I
how
mean,
that
it
works?
yeah, then your blind side's on the
Yeah,
right side.
wouldn't it be?
So
So
yeah,
then you don't have to pay
absolutely
your left tackle as much, and then you can just
correct. Now,
you're onto something.
isn't that Tua or whatever that guy's name is? Tua. I am
Yeah,
not.
that
Isn't he
everyone
left-handed?
loves. I think so. He
Yeah. There
also
you
has
go.
the hips of a woman in her 80s, apparently,
Yikes! Yikes!
which sounds like right up the Vikings alley.
So that's the plan. They're going to trade all those draft picks. They're going to trade 11 picks for for the first pick overall.
Yeah, Herschel Walker 2.0. Go for it. Ah, I don't know. There's a couple corners the team has been linked to, neither of which have first or second name familiarity with me. Logan Ryan or Daryl Roberts. Roberts was released from the Jets. He had a good game against the Vikings in 2018, so you might have that familiarity from that, where he had 11 tackles, two passes defended when the Vikings lost 37 to 17 against the Jets. According to Chris Thomason of the Pioneer Press, the Vikings have expressed interest in the quarterback, but have yet to make it an official offer. Logan Ryan is 29 years old. He won't cost over 10 million a year. Um,
God, is he worth it?
no, he won't cost. So they're not saying how much. They said they probably won't have to pay him over 10 million a year. As they only have 13 million left in cap space. At this point, though, it's almost God. I don't know. It would have been really nice to keep Mackenzie Alexander, have that nickel
Yep.
guy, and
Yep.
then just look for the guy opposite Hughes with Holton Hill as the depth guy who can split time with the rookie, because as we know, it takes a while for these guys to acclimate to Zimmer's system. Um,
Boy, they're going to have a field day in the NFC Central this year.
uh, it's
Or
gonna
North, I'm
be
sorry.
yeah. Well,
They are. Those other teams are. They're going to be looking at, these guys struggling to pick up Zimmer's system and whoever is going to be playing the corners, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot against the Vikings.
yeah, it's. I mean, do you really? I know you're not one for these kind of predictions, but I know Charlie Walters of the TwinCities.com/Pioneer Press said that the Vikings are looking like a 5-win team this upcoming season, and I said, well, my initial headline for that article was, "Why are you so optimistic?" Um, like you said a few minutes ago, the Vikings are never that bad.
Right.
Outside of that 3-13 season, which was just a complete disaster, um, they're always pretty good, which is why they're a top five team in his over the course of their existence. Winning percentage wise, maybe going in the tank wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them either.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you
I
get
just
better
can't
draft.
imagine they're gonna win that many games.
I responded to your story. I thought, I thought that was a little low, and as you had pointed out, it's early yet. There's still some moves to make. You don't know what they're going to pick up. You don't know. I got to believe they got more things in mind. I can't, see the Vikings writing this off as, even though it looks like a rebuild, as that they're going to just mail it in, because these guys don't have contracts. Spielman and Zimmer passed the
Yeah,
year, so they've got to win some ball games, and and I thought, maybe 8-8, 9 wins. They could get there when all said and done, because they got 2 games against the Bears and 2 against the Lions, which is always helpful. And they played the Packers are no. I don't know. It's early to speculate on that. We just don't know what the teams are going to be. So I think that's a little bit pessimistic. And Charlie Walters did say as of right now, so that implies that there's more changes to be made, and there will be. We don't know what this team looks like yet.
there have been a few free agents that they've been linked to that apparently they made offers to that took offers elsewhere.
Uh-oh.
Um, and I've written seriously like 50 articles in the last week, so I'm trying to think of who, but it just feels like the TJ Houshmandzadeh era where we couldn't even get him to sign here. Um, I was so excited about that visit, and they took him to Manny's, and I was like, I should drive by. Ugh. He was like a 32-year-old possession receiver, and I was so excited about it.
Yeah, and he did
Um,
nothing after with
no,
the team he did end up on. Yeah.
I think he went to Seattle. Um, because I have a cease and desist on their letterhead. Um, but yeah, it just feels like a lot of these guys are like, why would I go there? That team is not looking too hot right now. But who knows? I mean, if anyone could figure it out, it'd be Spielman, it'd be Brzezinski, maybe Zimmer. But I don't know. I just wasn't mentally prepared. I knew this offseason was going to be rough and there's going to be a lot of change and that they were up against it. But I guess I didn't expect them to pull the nuclear option and really say, okay, well, we can either try to put a few band-aids over this shotgun wound and be on paper weaker than we were and then go up and run into the 49ers again. My hope there was that I thought maybe Kubiak could get them over the hump and create this elite offense, but yeah, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It's ugh.
It's a crapshoot, baby. I
It
just
is indeed.
hope we have a season.
Yeah. I mean, well, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing.
Yeah.
If we can all focus on other things, start talking about maybe the Vikings TV show or I don't know, people with purple hearts since we get emails at least once a week of people thinking that's what our website's about. Maybe I could actually start giving back to the community instead of taking from it all the time. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
though. TBD. Anyway, that'll be the show for this week. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. There was a little bit of a, I don't know if that was just through my headphones or if people are going to pick up on that. There was a little bit of a, like when you talked, like a stutter,
Yeah.
which to me means that the coronavirus has gone digital. If that's the case, everybody get off the grid. But we shall be back next week. Stay tuned to both Purple PTSD and VikingsTerritory.com for all of your Vikings news. We should have Chad Greenway on the show next week. I believe Sage Rosenfels will be on the show the week after that, and then maybe a blast from the past and Luke Braun will be hopping on the show the week after that. So we're getting guests. Is
Wow.
my point. Yeah, we're back, man, and
Yeah. Everybody's at
everybody's,
everybody's at home with their phone.
you know, it's not to give away the farm to some of our competition, but if you're looking to get guest appearances from people, now's the time because people have free time and they're looking to plug stuff. But yeah, stay tuned to that and check out the new Bob Dylan song. Apparently, it's 17 minutes long.
Murder Most Foul. It's about the JFK assassination.
Sounds
Check
like a
it out.
real a dance song. But yeah, this has been Morning Joe's Skull.